everyone, and welcome to this month's episode of the Read Right to Left podcast. I am, as always, G from Simply G, joined by my always wonderful co-host, Ray from Whimsical Pictures.
Hello, everyone.
And this month, we are spotlighting a particular demographic. We'll be talking about Josei manga. It's February, so typically it's the month of, well, buying people's love. But
Valentine's Day, Galentine's Day,
yes.
Palentine's Day,
yes.
Whatever you all love to celebrate.
Yes. And companies just want us to be able to express our love in the most material way possible. So, in relation to that, we are going to be talking about Josei series, what Josei is, and for a majority of this episode, actually answering your questions. We got so many this month. Thank you guys so much for that. But I think it will give a pretty fair overview. It will let us talk about particular series and creators that we enjoy, and as well as the sorts of genres that we see within this demographic as well, I think, a little bit. And yeah, so rather than spend too long on this intro, I think we should just get straight into what Josei manga actually is, what that word means, and what sorts of series do we see for Josei manga in English?
Yep. So I think a lot of people are aware of, I guess, sort of the four quote-unquote main demographics of manga. Certainly I think the most famous ones are shonen and shoujo, which, you know, have, I guess, thoroughly come into the English manga fandom vernacular, especially through, like, Viz's Shonen Jump and Shoujo Beat labels. I think people generally have an idea what to expect from those two words. Shonen being largely series aimed at a presumed male audience, roughly between the ages of 8 and 18, and shoujo being aimed at girls of the same age demographic. And we see a broadening of this all the time, especially with regards to shonen, but there is also an older sort of demographic, manga aimed at adults over the age of 18, and for the presumed male audience, that is called seinen, and for the presumed female audience over the age of 18, that is josei. Basically.
Yes.
The basic rundown. It's the most basic definition. It basically just tells you where in the bookstore to look for your books, more than anything else.
Yeah. I think, as you said, demographics are, and age ranges and presumed audiences nowadays definitely helped thanks to accessibility, has really kind of not, it's not really an indication of much anymore. I think majority of manga fans, regardless of age or gender, read shonen manga. Quite a few of those same people read shoujo, and seinen certainly. But typically Josei is kind of the, not black sheep of the group, but it's certainly the least popular or least well known. I think certain people, I think fans may even be reading Josei series that they don't like immediately know are Josei series. And that's, again, just sort of a testament to these demographics don't really indicate much aside from maybe what magazine they were in originally, and perhaps some of the tropes or things that you may expect, but really, you know,
pretty much.
It's, you know, six of six of some, half a dozen of the other. It's the
yeah. I feel like
it's the same thing.
I feel like we've both talked before about how utterly meaningless the word seinen is at this point.
Yeah.
Like, seinen is absolutely a general audience's demographic. Like, you know, Berserk is just as much a seinen series as Witch Hat Atelier is, you know, a seinen series. Whereas I feel like just like with shoujo as compared to shonen, which has more of a general audience's feel to it, I feel that Josei in the same way, even in how it's marketed over here, as well as the types of genres that you see represented, there is this idea of, like, series that are for boys are for everyone, and series that are for girls are specialized, a special interest. And I think that's definitely the case, not just with people's consuming habits, but also the way that Josei is marketed and created. There's a ton of series that are under a seinen label because they're from, like, you know, indie magazines or mixed audience magazines, general audience magazines, that are labeled as seinen because seinen's such a general label, that are, you know, very much centering the experiences of, you know, adult women, which I think is, I don't know, kind of interesting. Depressing, you know, but, yeah. I don't know, I found while I was going through the series that I've read that it was, like, I had to, like, check quite a few times to be like, is this actually a Josei? Or
was it just
a seinen? Like, looking to check the magazine, right? Because it's so hard to tell with a lot of these.
Yeah, it's, as you said, I think typically, all female focused or audience specific media does typically, or does have this assumption that it's a specialized thing, that it's going to be harder or not as accessible to boys or men in the same way that, you know, women can relate to a male protagonist, which is sad, right? But it also does mean that shoujo and josei is thus then able to, I guess, explore women's lives and problems a bit more, in a way that I don't necessarily think. Well, I mean, it might just kind of push away that male audience even more. But it does mean that josei very often, almost always, is focused on adult women and their lives and the adult, like, problems in their lives, but just issues insofar as whether that be relationship issues, whether that be health issues, things like pregnancy or marriage or divorce,
work, which
obviously, like, a lot of men would experience too, but not happening to that. Like, men are never, well, cisgendered men aren't going to be experiencing pregnancy in the same way that a cisgendered woman is. So, like, there is that disconnect a little bit, but I would argue that if you have a pregnant partner, you'd hopefully, you know, be trying to be supportive and interested and invested in the same way that, you know, a mother is.
Well, I was about to, like, give a bit of a hot take, if I could.
Absolutely.
A spicy hot take. I feel like a lot of specifically male manga fans who come to, I don't know, I feel like you probably experience this too, is like, if you're a woman making manga related videos, you get a lot of guys who are like, where should I start with shoujo and josei manga? Which is all well and good, but it's like, there's an assumption that I'm supposed to give you a series that is not deeply centered around the inner lives and experiences specific to being a woman in Japanese society. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I read a lot of series that are about, specifically the male experiences that are different from the way that my life is or ever will be. And I find it totally easy, natural, to empathize with those experiences and find an interesting story in there. So I do get a little frustrated when there's this assumption that it's just impossible to find a connection point between your life and the struggles that may be a bit more specific to women in society. I would like to see more people who are interested in giving that stuff a shot.
I think, Ray, you know my stance insofar as I cause drama in the Twitter sphere about how the inherent sexism in how people talk about shoujo and josei manga, of how the framing of a lot of series by typically, but everyone, but typically male fans as shoujo or josei series being quote unquote actually good, or not that shoujo or whatever, like framing
I just saw someone recommending Blue Flag because don't worry, it's not that LGBT. And I was like,
oh my gosh.
Which is a Shonen Jump series, by the way. I see a lot of people call that one shoujo, and it is not.
No. And again, that's sort of the framing.
Weird, right? To have a shonen drama series that treats the female characters like actual human beings with feelings and lives. It almost makes it feel like a shoujo series. Weird, and that.
Not to start the drama up on the podcast now, but the inherent assumption that every romance series must be written for women, as if Shonen Jump isn't filled with romantic comedy harem series literally all of the time.
Right.
Some of the most influential series that are still classic, still popular, are rom-coms, but because male protagonists somehow all of a sudden it's not like those icky, I don't know, Kimi Toroke or something.
Yeah, those icky girl series with their cooties.
What makes Nisekoi or Ah My Goddess or
quintessential quintuplets?
Or Love Hina, or any of these things less about romance compared to Kimi ni Toroke, or I don't know, anything coming out of Shoujo Beat, anything that is focused on high school romance. It's just weird, man. It's weird.
I don't know, man. But anyway, getting spicy early in the evening today. I encourage y'all to have an open, eager interest in the inner lives of women. Female characters.
Yes. I think there's I think there's always something, if you're not used to, I say this as obviously someone who reads a lot of stuff, and I have a very wide reading range, and I always have, even outside of manga, and it's advice that's given to creators a lot, writers and illustrators and whatever, that you have to kind of consume a lot of a certain type of media before you can fully, like, understand it. I don't know. I feel like if you're very insular in your consumption of content, then you just kind of miss some of the most interesting and influential and important things. Where would manga be now if if Japan never, like, took any interest in Rose of Versailles? A lot, like, it would be so totally different from what it is now. Or Heart of Thomas, or any of the Year 24 stuff, or any of that influential shoujo. We've already had this whole conversation in an earlier podcast episode. So
yeah, okay, so that's what Josei is, and also some extra spice on the side.
Yes.
Should we get into the first question?
Absolutely.
Okay, so the first question is actually a good one to connect with this. From @TalesOfColor, is asking for recommendations of romance series for people who usually don't like romance.
Yeah, I don't know if anything immediately comes to mind. I always find that, like, one of the questions I follow that question up with is, what don't you like about romance?
Basically. There's a lot of different kinds of romance series. So it's kind of hard to...
Exactly.
Like, do you not like cheese? I guess? Cheesiness? I did write down a couple that I think I've seen appeal to people over the years who aren't necessarily big fans of, like, you know, the sort of realistic romance type of genre. One of them is the story of Saiyunkoku, which is, I mean, I guess it's technically like a low fantasy, but there's not really any magical elements in it. But it is about a girl who ends up being hired as the consort to the emperor in order to teach him about politics, and later on it's about her journey towards trying to become the country's first female civil servant. But, you know, it's also like a goofy reverse harem with a lot of cute politician boys. And it's like her relationship with the emperor, who is openly bisexual, which we love to see. So I like that one because, first of all, Shurei is not a, you know, wallflower by any sense of the word. She's not some sort of, like, I guess, more blank slate type of romance protagonist. She's very much in the, like, Yona, you know, Yoko kind of vein of, like, being very gung-ho and smart and political, strong-willed heroine. And there's always, you know, politics weaving through everything that happens in that series, which I think is fun. Yep.
I would... So, as Ray said, like, dependent on what it is you dislike about typical, like, romance series, whether that be that it's too cheesy, whether you dislike very strict, like, heteronormative relationship dynamics, whether that be you just aren't someone who really cares about romance or has any investment in romance generally because of, I don't know, other reasons. It is very... there's a lot of Josei that has romance, like, quite prominently in the series, but isn't inherently about romance. Like Story of Sankoku, as you said, there's like, it's a reverse harem, but it's got politics, and, you know, it's not a... I think that's a good example. And in a similar vein, well, not similar insofar as, like, genre, but in a similar vein, one of the series that I would recommend is also one of the series that I think really, like, exploded Josei's recent popularity in the West, and that is Princess Jellyfish, which it has romance elements in it, but it's more so about well, it's a comedy, but it's more so about being true to yourself, your passions, the fashion industry, obviously, as well. But being able to express yourself and being able to take pride in the things that you are invested in, regardless of, like, what the rest of the world thinks about that. And it's just overall, like, a really funny, likable cast. There's sort of a love triangle between Tsukimi and the main character and the two half brothers in that series. And so there's that element, but even at the end of it, I don't know, they're just also likable. It's like, I don't even care how all of that wraps up. I just want everyone to be happy. I want everything to be going well for these kids. I say, as, like, some of them are in their 30s, but but that one, I think, if you don't, I don't know, I find that creator, her stuff is very funny, so if you are someone who likes comedy, then that one's a good one to go with. In a similar sense, or, like, on the opposite side of the spectrum, if you're more so interested in nuanced looks at relationships, at romance, at things like that, then something like Maiden Railways might be more your thing, where it's small snapshots of all sorts of different relationships, some romantic, some not, and it's more so you know, just a fun little one and done with a lot of sweet interlinking stories about people who catch the train.
Yeah, I would put, like, All My Darling Daughters as well as another one that's a good, like, 1-volume collection of interconnecting short stories. It's more about relationships between mothers and daughters, but there's certainly a lot of other different kinds of relationships in there. Yeah, that one's good. I mean, it's Fumi Yoshinaga, so...
I was about to say, and my favorite mangaka, so gets my seal of approval. Pretty sure that's the one that was nominated for an Eisner as well.
I think so. Maybe. I think so. Probably. It's really good. I would also say, I was just thinking about the one that I just read today, which just came out yesterday, I think. I read it digitally, is Haru's Curse.
Yeah.
It's done in 1 volume. This one, I don't know, it was like getting a bunch of awards for a while, but this, first of all, the art style, I feel like, is a little bolder and harsher than you often see with Josei manga. It reminded me of Detective Conan's art style more than anything else. But, this is a romance between a woman and a man after the death of the woman's sister. But it's a lot more complicated than that. It's dealing a lot with her grief, both of their grief over her loss, because this man was engaged to be married to the sister. Yeah. And they started dating after the sister died. So it's a very complicated, messy situation. And it gets messier. But
not unrealistic. That actually does... Not unrealistic either, though. That does kind of happen. It does...
That's what I liked about it, is that even though it deals with some pretty, like, tangled and twisted up emotions, like, it feels very realistic to how these two characters are dealing with the grief of the loss of this person, who they both had a very different relationship to. And trying to figure out what their relationship to each other means in the context of that grief. As well as they're both dealing with separate sort of messy family situations. And they end up finding, through each other and through their grief, their own ways toward freedom and independence as young adults. And I think that just the way that it's not just about, who's in love with who and who's, in a messy relationship with who. It's more like the whole of these characters' lives being affected by this traumatic event and how they contextualize their relationship in the wake of that event might make it more interesting to someone who, maybe isn't that drawn to just, like, romance stories in general, who feels like maybe they're a little trite or just not that interesting to read about. I think this one might be worth giving a shot.
I think on that kind of similar rationale, but for... It's not that it's not tropey or cheesy in a certain sense, but stuff like, or a series like Perfect World, where it's obviously about a romantic relationship, but there's other elements pertaining to disability and how that affects relationships, is maybe also another option that... Because it does lean into certain, like, tropes of romance, and it's not that it's, like, a wholly... It's not that it's completely lacking the cheese at certain points, but it does have that other element to the relationship, that whether it be you want to see particular, like, handling of disability and how that affects relationships, or you're just wanting something a little outside of the more standard, like, boy meets girl and drama ensues, then that might be another title to think about.
I also like how much that series goes into Ayukawa, I think his name is, his job. We do get quite a bit of information on, like, barrier-free architecture, and he is loosely based off of a real architect. So I always like Josei series that don't just spend all the time, like, with the romantic relationship, but also focus on the characters' careers, so that's kind of nice. I think the girl is an interior designer as well, but we don't get as much focus on that. Question number 2. This is from @LesboPyhemus. What makes a good romance josei? And how does josei differ from shoujo? Are there some things it does better than shoujo when it comes to romance? We'll treat that as one question. So basically, what makes a good romance josei, and is it different from a good romance shoujo? And are there some things that it does better than shoujo when it comes to romance?
So I think for me, honestly, this goes for any romance, whether it be Josei, shonen, shoujo, seinen, whatever it is. I always... It's very dependent on the couple. Like, I have to be invested in the relationship. I'm not really a fan of, like, the wallflower meets the bad boy type of stories, typically.
But I'm also, like, not interested in the, like, dowdy secretary meets the hot company president scenario, so.
Exactly. But I think what makes a good romance josei for me is being able to portray an adult relationship. So obviously people who are out of high school, whether that they be in college, whether they be working, with the maturity that you would hope adults have, without just immediately jumping right into the same sort of contrite misunderstandings. And if there is things like jealousy or miscommunication or whatever, if it is able to actually handle that as if our characters are adults who like each other and who want a relationship to work and therefore communicate with each other, that's sort of what is the point of difference for me. And further to the rest of that question, a lot of that, and it's because the difference in that from shoujo is that there is a lot more misunderstandings. There is a lot more like withholding your feelings and not being open and
there's like
communicative.
A rival girl who shows up and like looks at the boy in the wrong way, and the protagonist is like spends the next 8 volumes being like, oh my god, they're totally like in love, and he doesn't care about me, he only cares about that girl, and then she like never talks to either of them, and then in the end it turns out that she was like his cousin or something. You're like,
they're neighbors and they've just known each other forever. Talk to each other. But the thing is, in shoujo, that when it's like a high school romance or when you're dealing with teenagers, I don't know if people remember when they were a teenager, but that is not unusual. that drama, that strangeness, and the fear of actually speaking to the people that you are interested in, definitely our adolescence is a rough time for everyone. All of those hormones just screw everybody up. So I can believe it when it's a 15-year-old. I
can, but also I don't always want to read it.
No, I'm not saying that it makes it compelling, but I'm saying I can absolutely believe that a 16-year-old is gonna be stressed out about the weirdest stuff because the boy that she likes, forgot to text back immediately, right? I'm less forgiving when your characters are meant to be like 29 years old and presumably have been working for 10 years and interacting with other people.
But I mean, that's honestly the main reason that I would read a josei over a shoujo, is that, I mean, I'm 25. And the more I gain in years, the less patience I have for teenagers and their bullshit. And honestly, that's what it comes down to most of the time. I mean, I feel like there's ways to do it interestingly. That's why I still read quite a decent amount of shoujo. Like, but I feel like a lot of times it's not done in an interesting way at all. Like, I was just reading Kageki Shoujo, right? And there's the 2 main characters, the idol girl and the main girl, Sarasa. And the idol girl is, like, because of a lot of stuff that's happened in her past, she really doesn't like showing emotion, and she's not good at it. Expressing herself or showing passion for anything, but, like, a big part of the latter half of that book is, like, her realizing that she actually does really want to be friends with her roommate, and trying to figure out how to express that to her and still maintain her coolness. And it's adorable. So, I mean, it can be endearing. It can be endearing and compelling.
Yeah, it's certainly not, like... I hate to pit demographics against each other, because despite us saying that they're quite arbitrary at the beginning, they are catering to different groups of people. And teenagers love seeing themselves in manga, right? So, and that's good. That's actually really great. So I read a lot of shoujo. I enjoy a lot of shoujo, but a lot of it typically is stuff that I read once, and I'm happy that these kids are going to live happily ever after.
Yes.
But I don't need to keep that, like, deep in my heart or on the shelves, because, you know, it's by the numbers. It's typically a happily ever after, and that's what you want sometimes. But sometimes you just want, like, actual real life.
I want characters who complain about overtime as much as I
do. Exactly.
Yeah. Honestly, if I'm gonna read a story that's all full of teenage angst, I will read a 70s shoujo manga, because, you know what? If I'm gonna read something full of angst, I want it to be the most angsty thing that could possibly exist. I just... every emotion. I want to feel every emotion all at once. The other question from @LesboPahimis is, what Josei titles would you like to see licensed?
I have one specific answer to this, and it's a long shot. I would cry if it happened, but I don't expect it to. And that is Kids on the Slope. I would murder someone in a dream for that series. I wouldn't actually murder someone in real life, but, like, I really want that series licensed. I do a lot of things for that series, but it's longish. It's kind of a little old. It's the popularity boost that it may have gotten from the anime is sort of past. So I doubt it unless we get nice, like, omnibus editions. But again, I doubt it, because Josei is not the most popular, and so it would be risky. And my other answer to that question is a series that has been licensed, but again, long shot will never happen. I'd love it to make the transition to print, and that is one of my favorite series, Chihayafuru, which will never happen because it's 40 plus volumes and a Josei sports series, which means it's just absolutely never gonna happen, sadly.
We can all dream.
Yeah, those are my dreams that will never come true.
Yep. My dreams are every single Moto Hagio title that has ever been released. Because she's worked with Flowers magazine for a long time, and so all of those are Josei titles. I don't care which ones, I want them all. I guess the one that I most want, and also the one that we're least likely to get, because it's 17 volumes long and depressing as hell, is Zankoku Nakami ga Shihai Suru, or A Savage God Reigns, which is about this kid named Jeremy who moves to the UK with his mom when she remarries to this guy. And his new stepfather, like, brutally abuses him. A lot. For, like, half the series. Until basically Jeremy ends up fixing his car. You know, not fixing. Like, fucking with it. So that it'll crash. And he ends up dying along with Jeremy's mother. And it's about him and his stepbrother dealing with the aftermath of that, and his stepbrother realizing how terrible his father was to this kid, and them also having this, like, inexplicable carnal draw to each other that is deeply, deeply toxic, but, like, they just can't stay away from each other. And it's really good. But it's weird as hell. And it's depressing. But yeah. I love it a lot. And I would love to have it. I mean, I do have it.
Yeah.
But I would love to have it in English.
So you can subject it upon all
Absolutely.
your friends, which means me.
Yes.
Which means me and our other group chat that we're in.
Are you telling me you would not read that?
No, I never said anything of the sort. But I'm just saying that the first person you'll subject it to is me.
Of course. So, how many series have I read because you told me to?
A lot. I'm not saying that I wouldn't read it. And do you know how many series I read because you've recommended them? A lot. This is a two-way street.
It's the synapses that we share, firing on both ends. Yeah, I want that in English, and I would buy it, and I would buy it, and, yeah. And I don't know when we're getting the other half of the Poe clan, but after that, I would also like the third half of the Poe clan, which is the new stuff. That would be nice. That's the other one I want. I want, like, a lot of the post-year 24 stuff is, like, Josei. There's a collection of short stories I really like called Bo ga Ippon by, what's her name? Fumiko Takano. It's just a collection of short stories that kind of spans her career, sort of like A Drunken Dream did with, Motohagyo in English. But, she just writes these really interesting little, like, snapshots into the lives of mostly, you know, young women, young wives. And I don't know, she has a very interesting, like, expressionistic way of portraying the world. I would like to see that.
Sounds interesting. I would definitely read it.
Next set of questions is from @365 Days of 801, who also asks what sets Josei apart from Shoujo. The age of the characters, mostly. Not always.
Yeah.
Chihayafuru is about teenagers, but I feel like there is a difference as far as, like, Josei series about teenagers tend to have more of a nostalgic lens to them, rather than a, this is happening now, oh my god, teenage feelings. It tends to be more like, oh, these kids, remember youth.
Remember when you had that passion for life, before you joined the working world and had that all crushed
and the light behind your eyes died. And she also says, and because I'm a BL enthuse, do you see any crossover of those genres? E.g., a BL that is Josei-like and vice versa. A lot of BL magazines are technically Josei magazines, so I would say yes.
Yeah, one of the recently released series, the carp on the chopping block jumps twice, and the cornered mouse dreams of cheese. Those are both Josei series, but BL series at the same time. Like, it's,
My beloved...
So we do actually see...
My beloved Itoshi no Nekoke is also a Josei series.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Also, not BL, but, like, Comic Yuri Hime is the most major, I guess, Yuri magazine, and that one is also technically a Josei magazine. So yeah, I don't really think that they're different. Like, most BL are Josei.
Yeah, and I think it just kind of expands that point that it's a look at messy adult relationships with adults. Just with queer characters versus heterosexual couple. Like, it's just more of the same thing.
Yep. Especially nowadays when we get so many series that are about, like, adult men falling in love in the workplace or whatever, like Cherry Magic or whatever. Which, I love a good office romance, so I'm here for it. But yeah. And also, like, the number of BL mangaka that we see becoming prominent in non-strictly BL, like Josei, like Fumi Yoshinaga, or Natsume Ono, or, Hariko Kumota. Junko does a lot of shoujo, And which, this is still from 365801, asks, which Josei titles deal with gender, sexuality, and do any address feminism from a Japanese perspective? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think some of the stuff that immediately comes to mind with regards to feminism from a Japanese perspective is some of the one-shots, vertical one-shots that we got, things like Pink and Helter Skelter and In Clothes Called Fat and All My Darling Daughters, which isn't a vertical release, but sort of in that wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Those typically focus on not only women and their, like, different relationships and whatever else, but it is very critical at how women find themselves, their place, quote unquote, in society and how fucked up it is typically. And a lot more of a discussion on, In Clothes Called Fat is a perfect example of this, of happiness being tied to body image, being tied to the media, and sort of the unobtainable standards. Again, something we see with Helter Skelter. So yeah, those sorts of things are, or those series, those books are what I would recommend if you're wanting something that's, like, very blatantly obvious as to that.
Also, some of Ano's other stuff, like her period stuff about, like, sex workers, like Sakuran, or Memoirs of Amorous Gentlemen, or Buffalo Five Girls. She talks a lot about like women's issues and women's sexuality and feminism. So, let's see. Ayazawa does as well in like Nana and Paradise Kiss both. I think maybe in a more, I don't know what to say, like a less didactic way. I don't know. She just sort of weaves them in as like, you know, these are some of the pressures that face women, and it really sucks for them, kind of thing. What else? I mean, a lot, I feel like. I mean, I don't know. I'm a woman really and I have a lot of feelings about women in society, so.
Yeah, I think it's really hard. It would be really hard to be writing a story about a working woman or like a housewife or a stay-at-home mother or any of these things without addressing feminism in some aspect, even if it isn't inherently like obvious. I would say that a majority of these series do have them, whether intentional or not. But it's just kind of part of the discussion, and we've said it before, but you know, if you're not a fan of the word feminism, you're not listening to the right podcast, so apologies guys. Thanks for sticking around this long, but feel free to leave.
In the more like sci-fi vein of things, A Prime and Otherworld Barbara also both deal a lot with gender issues and sexuality, especially A Prime. Oh, and Ooku. Yeah, that's what I was looking for in my list. Ooku is like
a Josei?
I think it's technically I don't remember. Melody, so it is a Josei series.
Oh, that's good to know. Well, yes, Ooku, absolutely 100% read it, buy it. It's recently ended in Japan. I adore it. May take a volume or two to get used to the English translation.
Extremely awkward, faux Shakespearean speech.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But it is, and I'm not just saying this as a Fumi Yoshinaga fangirl, it is incredible. There's so much going on. There's just, if you like political sagas, political thrillers almost, historical fiction, and really women's feminism, huge part of that story. But women's, and turning that idea of like women's roles in society on its head. If you're not familiar with Ooku, it is a fictionalized retelling of history in where the male population of Japan under 20 was largely wiped out from a contagious pox, leaving society as majority women for a long time, hundreds of years. And so in response to that, obviously women have taken over basically everything. They're the heads of families, they're heads of government, they're business owners, and in the, like, conversely, men or boys have become sort of the cherished, beloved, cloistered away, you know, young damsels to be, you know, bought and traded and sold and like whatever else that typically girls would have been. And so it, obviously a huge shift in the societal dynamics, but it's still retelling actual historical events, but with the caveat of what if the emperor was actually a woman, but history hasn't recorded it that way because Japan didn't want anyone to know that they were a nation of women primarily for a long time. So yeah, it's really super good, and read it.
There you have it. The next, like, question is from @RinReadsManga. Looking for Josei series for a hopeless romantic, please. And they say, I'm having a hard time finding romance with adult characters that isn't the digital-only smutty stuff.
Yeah, okay, so my recommendation for a hopeless romantic is My Androgynous Boyfriend. Because that is super sweet, and those two are hopelessly in love. It's not super explicit, but it's also not super tame. Like, these are adults who are in an established relationship, and thus, you know, that comes part and parcel with how they interact. But it's also just really lovely and sweet, and certainly hopelessly romantic in just how gaga those two are for each other, even if other people don't quite understand all of the time.
Yeah. I would actually say Perfect World I find to be a really, really romantic series. Obviously really stressful to read at times. There's a lot of bad things that happen in it, as it deals with, you know, such a heavy central issue, I guess, of the main male character's spinal injury. But, I don't know, just the way that these two just can't stay away from each other is, I don't know, the romantic inside me is just really, really into that. It's so sweet. I don't know. I would also say this is like a borderline series because it runs in Dessert, which runs both Josei and Shoujo series. But A Sign of Affection is about college students. It's about a girl who was born deaf, who, I don't know, she's sort of shy, and she ends up meeting this boy who is sort of a world traveler, you know, loves backpacking across new countries and everything. Speaks like 3 different languages or something. And, you know, he's fascinated by, you know, the fact that she speaks signed Japanese and he doesn't know any sign languages. So he's really interested in talking to her and learning a bit of sign language, and their relationship just sort of develops from there. And it's adorable. It's so cute. These two characters are so really just cute. Like sweet and nice to each other, and like just like genuinely into each other. I don't know. It's super cute. I'd recommend that one.
Yeah, it's a good recommendation. And this isn't a josei, but I'm gonna tack it on here anyway, as for if you're looking for romance with adult characters that isn't just the digital-only smutty stuff, but still have some of that spiciness, is a series we've talked about before, one that I've really been enjoying, and that's Sweat and Soap. And
I knew it.
Yeah. Well, of course, like, it's so super good, and if you are wanting, and I think, again, it's a testament to what we were talking about earlier, is that romance is, you know, anyone can read it, anyone can enjoy it, and it's something that is across all of the demographics. And some of the best romance stuff that's been coming out recently has been from seinen publishers. But regardless, read that one. It's super good.
It's super good. I think it will appeal to people who like josei as well, for sure.
Yes.
It's a workplace
definitely.
Romance. Next we have next set of questions from @LoomRanmayasha. Favorite mangaka specializing in josei? Let's answer that one first.
Akiko Higashimura. And Haruko Kumota. Love them. And I mean, Yoshinaga as well, but, like, we know that I'm just a crazy fangirl for her anyway, but those two. And the thing about, like, Higashimura in particular is that her stuff, obviously Princess Jellyfish is super funny and really charming and wonderful, but kind of also, like, cringy, uncomfortable in the way that you recognize yourself. And Tokyo Tarareba Girls is, like, even more that, but also with, like, the crushing, even more so the crushing social pressures on women. Yeah. It's just, like, kind of cranked to 11 because the cast of that is a decade older than the main character in Princess Jellyfish. And her other stuff, I think is, well, of what
her ability to, like, reflect back on her own life and, like, laugh at herself in blank canvas is so good.
Yes, and that's the thing. That's the point of difference, I think, is that self-awareness. Mm-hmm. The reason she writes about, like, characters who are, like, cringily just, like, super obsessed with really weird or socially unacceptable, quote-unquote, pastimes, like otaku, like idol fans, like whatever else, is because that is her. Like, she's writing about herself. Mm-hmm. And she can do that with the knowledge of, without, like, making it offensive or disrespectful to the character and to the people who relate to those characters, but also with the knowledge and the intimate, like, familiarity with facing that, like, pressure of having to have, like, reached a certain point in your job by a certain age, or be married and have kids by a certain age, or be able to achieve this, and if you haven't done this, then why haven't you? And oh no, you're failing as a woman. And
I feel like how, like, well versed she is in Japanese pop culture.
Yes.
Also, like, contributes to when she's, like, here talking about, like, societal pressures on women. I think the way that she pulls in, like, stuff from all the music and dramas and, you know, variety shows and whatever that she happens to consume as an avid consumer of various media. I think that just adds to the types of issues that she's often confronting.
Yes.
You know, in a lighthearted and silly way, but still very much being like, you know, this sucks and it's hard sometimes.
Cuts to the bone, and I have said it before, I will continue to say it, in that Tokyo Tarareba Girls is literally one of the scariest horrors that you can read, because it's incredibly too close to home. It hits way, way harder than it needed to in my own. Yeah.
I also really like Moyoko Ano, like I talked about. I think she's really good at getting at a more, like, cynical side to, like, womanhood and toxic femininity.
Yes.
You know, as a response to, like, patriarchal pressures on women. And I do like, again, how she writes about sex workers with a lot of empathy and strength, but still very much, like, acknowledging the unique pressures that are on women in those jobs in these time periods. You know, and, yeah, she's really good. She's really good. I think she's said before something along the lines of, like, you know, talking about how much the reason she writes women who are so manipulative and despicable is because she actually hates women. That she thinks that, you know, yeah, they're really dark. She's got a quote about that somewhere. But I think that kind of, it comes out in her work, but I feel like it's not like a, you know, hating women so much as realizing that women are complicated enough to do despicable things, if that makes sense.
Sometimes women are their own worst enemy, sadly, and you see it.
Sometimes they don't have a choice as well.
Exactly. Yeah, there's certain. I mean, like people just. Women
people are complicated.
People are complicated, and women, unfortunately, being the sex that is typically when we live in a patriarchal society, women are the ones who bear the grunt of that, and so choices have to be made, and in order to survive, in order to kind of get on with things, and
you know, why did Anthe stab Utna, right? Because if she acknowledged all of the things that her brother did to her, she would have to acknowledge all of the things that she did too. And I like Kyoko Okazaki for similar reasons. I like how anti-capitalist she is. That's always appreciated. And Moto Hagio, obviously.
Yeah. And I briefly mentioned in my initial answer, but Haruko Kumata, I think we only have, we have some for BL in English, thanks to Furukiya, but
not enough of
it. Not enough of it. And also, her main Josei series, one of my favorite series of all time, is Descending Stories, aka Showa Genroku Rakugo Shinju, 10 volumes completed, and has a phenomenal anime adaptation. Go watch it on Crunchyroll right now. Like, if you haven't watched it yet, I don't know what's wrong with you. But the manga is phenomenal. It is also a little bit atypical in that it focuses on what is presented as a male character, follows his life and his relationship with his art, which is Rakugo. He's a professional storyteller, and his relationships in his life, and how his decisions, and how he lived from a very early age up until his death, and how his life is so innately connected with his artistry, and how that affects him and his choices. And it's so good.
It's so good.
And
my gosh.
if you don't cry 400 times, then there's some. Yeah.
And man, if we're talking about like Josei that are tackling issues of gender and sexuality, man.
Oh yeah. That one.
From so many different angles.
Yeah, there's a lot of really interesting stuff in there, just on the surface, but if you dive in a little deeper, there's so much really interesting things to explore, and it's beautiful, and the anime has amazing Rakugo performances. So,
oh my gosh, like Akira Ishida, the range of this man in this role.
Honestly,
Kaoru Nagisa could never.
No. Yakumo is honestly one of the most compelling protagonists I've ever come across. His life, his story is just phenomenal, and it's very rare that you get such a, I don't know. It's not rare that you see the inner mind or the life of a creator, especially a male creator. But I think there's just certain nuances there that are handled in such a different way than the norm, and I adore it. It's phenomenal, and everyone go
it's
read
like,
and watch it.
You know, using Rakugo as like this whole metaphor for like, you know, the sort of passing of the torch from traditional Japan to modern Japanese society, and you know, seeing that through a gender lens as well with what's the girl's name? She, you know, wants to be the next Skeroku, right? And Rakugo is a traditionally male art. There's so many layers to everything that happens. Oh my gosh. I also, like, I wanted to say, like, in terms of Kumoto's work, something I really like about her work, both Descending Stories and in the BL of hers that I've read, is, like, I feel like she's not afraid to write characters who do very ugly things and are not very, I guess, pretty people in terms of their personalities. You know, they're messy, but, like, she writes them so that they're so lovable despite and because of their flaws. I don't know.
They're human, and they make human decisions, and
they're human
mistakes.
But they're also so huggable. Like, there is a huggability to even her most despicable characters that I think is very uniquely Kumota.
Yes. And the character is Konatsu, is trying to...
That's what I thought! Wow.
Yeah.
I should have just followed my instincts.
Gone with your gut there. But yes, so if you have the Futakiya subscription, there's several of her works available that way, and Kodansha has released Descending Stories in its entirety, in print and digital, and yes, and with Descending Stories, like you said, not only it's sort of the title itself, the Japanese title itself, just kind of pulls in all of the elements very, very well. The fact that it is set in this huge period of change in Japan from the Showa period, which obviously covers like a huge range of time. And so much stuff happened during the Showa period. Obviously, the war, then the, kind of the economic fall, like post-war Japan, and then the economic bubble of the 80s and stuff, and that's all connected. Society, the global society changed so much between, the 1920s and the 1980s.
Yep.
That, and by an extension of that, how people entertained themselves, as you said, this change from traditional arts and entertainment to television and radio, and now we've got dance halls, and we've got so much cars, we've got things to do and places to be, and people don't necessarily want to sit down and listen to a storyteller on stage, but then again, looking at the cultural relationship with these traditional arts as well, and how one person, despite their relationship with their art, isn't wholly what that is, and how the importance of maintaining traditional arts, I think, is one of the other really big things. Anyway, yes, we'll continue. I have gushed enough.
Yeah. I guess the title Showa Genroku just refers to, like, the period in Japanese history. Rakugo, of course, is the practice of, storytelling that this traditional Japanese performing art form But Shinju is interesting because it means a lover's suicide.
Yes.
And that comes into play in some fascinating ways.
It is very pertinent to the series
Yeah, we won't give away that. And then Lumran Mayasha also asks if we have any series we want to see licensed, which we already answered, but then also asks if there is a particular genre or type of Josei manga that we'd like to see more of.
I'm a real big fan of the current Josei horror that we have, aka Phantom Tales of the Night. Give me more of that sort of stuff, because I mean...
Give G more yokai.
Not just yokai, give G more yokai creepy horror stuff. I really am not into, like, yokai romance. I don't want that. But give me the creepy, weird, interesting stuff.
Ooky spooky.
Like, ooh. Ooky spooky is exactly right. And we haven't really talked about this much, because a lot of these questions have been romance-focused, for a good reason. But of course, like with every demographic, we have a huge range of genres here. The series we were just talking about, Descending Stories, is more so a drama than, like, romance-focused or anything else. Like, it's a human drama story. And in a similar sense, of course, you know, Phantom Tales of the Night is a yokai, spooky, psychological, creepy series. And I would like to see more just diverse stuff. We recently got My Broken Mariko, which is another very personal, emotional focused story that doesn't, well, I mean, you could argue that it has romance in it. We don't quite know. And that one's a single volume about a woman who, after the untimely death of her best friend, kind of reflects on her best friend's life and the very, very sad circumstances that kind of throughout her life, the entirety of her life and her circumstances and how it got to this point where she ended up dying, and then this friend, her role in this other woman's life, and how, and that guilt, that kind of reflection on could I have done more, and that seeing that or feeling that responsibility, and that's wonderful. Not an easy read, to say the least, but it's really, really good. And that's again, like, really interesting stuff. Another very, like, different genre, but also kind of more focused on an emotional story is another wonderful series that nobody knows about because it is very hard to get. It's very out of print. And I think actually the very first series that Yen Press ever released, and that is With the Light, Raising an Autistic Child, which is about a mother and her experience as a parent to a child with autism and other developmental things in his life. He's not just autistic, but he's nonverbal, if I'm remembering correctly. So
yes,
her just kind of being a new parent and not knowing anything about autism and exploring that whole.
It deals a lot with the special education system in Japan as well.
Yes, and because I don't know if bigotry is quite the right word, but just how hard it can be for special education kids and those who do need, a little bit more support. And of course, the stigma, the social stigma of mental illness and developmental disorders and things like that. So it's really good.
There's also it talks a lot about misconceptions about autism in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Because, the word for autism in Japanese is made up for kanji that are, the closing off of the self from the world.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people assume that it's, an anxiety disorder, when they don't know, what autism is. So it deals a lot with, dispelling those misconceptions about autism and autism spectrum disorder. A lot of the information there is going to be dated now, but...
but it was certainly helpful, I think, for a lot of people. Because I think more people now, both in the West and in Japan, are maybe more, they've had more experience with autism. It's become a little less...
Maybe.
There's... maybe. I mean, because for my... I do think that perhaps in the US and where I live in Australia and in certain parts of the world, it's probably more likely that someone with autism, or you have a friend who has autistic family member, or you have autism in your family. I think there's a little bit more understanding and discussion about it versus other places in the world. That might be completely off, I don't know, but it's something that certainly gained a bit more prominence over the course of my lifetime, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that has become more and more talked about and accepted and kind of demystified, as it were, or destigmatized a lot over the last couple decades.
Yeah, for sure. I still think it's... Yeah, I really enjoy that series. I really appreciate, obviously considering where I work now, I appreciate what it taught me about, the Japanese education system, which I think a lot of what happens in that series, some of it has changed for the better, but a lot of it is still, structurally very much the same, I think. Mm-hmm. So... I don't know, it's helped me in some weird ways over the years.
And although it is very out of print, in print, you can still get it digitally, I believe, unless the license has lapsed. But, it is worth hunting down if you're interested.
Yeah. For genres that I want to see more of, I... really like office romances, but I really don't like office romances with weird as hell power dynamics. So I would like more of the type of office romance that's co-workers, and less of the type that's the secretary with the company president would be nice.
Yeah.
Just on a personal level, it's not my kink. I love coworker romance. I love romance between two people who are very passionate about their work. Everyone's Getting Married.
Yes.
Where, they work in different sort of companies, but they're both supporting each other the whole way. I love that. I take a lot of pride in my work as well, so I like seeing that reflected in fiction, I guess.
So what you're telling me is that you want Sweat and Soap, but just copy-pasted 5 times.
Yeah. I want Sweat and Soap, but I want it again and again and again in lots of different areas of the working world. Yeah, everyone's getting married is great. What I've read of An Incurable Case of Love is pretty good. That one has kind of like the nurse and doctor thing, but it's like, I feel like she has a lot of pride as a nurse, and he has a lot of pride as a doctor, and I like that. Perfect World as well.
Yeah. In a weird kind of way, Kazahikaru is a bit like this as well. Where, like, it's historical fiction, and they're not exactly in an office, but, like, they... but they're co-workers, right? Like, that works.
Yeah. Co-workers in the Shinsengumi. Okay. I get you. Same with, like, the story of Sayunkoku as well. They're both, like, supporting each other, even though one of them's, like, the emperor of the country, and the other one's, like, you know, working to be, like, a civil servant. But it's just, like, that mutual respect and, like, pride in each other's work is cool, and I like it, and I want more of it.
Yep.
Next set of questions is from @Takato Anime Cafe. Who wants Josei Rex for newbies, looking specifically for physical releases, and also asks, which should I pick up first, Rakugo Shinju or Ooku? I think Rakugo Shinju, both, but yes. I think Rakugo Shinju is the easier to get into.
It's shorter, it's probably easier to get to. Ooku, as I said, it takes, like, a little while to get used to the translation choices, but
which are like,
absolutely,
what light through yonder window breaks, bro.
but if you can stick with it, it's such a good series. But start with Descending Stories. It's phenomenal, absolutely 100% recommended. But Ooku is also ending in English very soon. It's already ended in Japan. It is almost double the length of Rakugo, so be aware of that. But again, both of them. Just get both of them. But to answer your first question, I would say Princess Jellyfish. Like, I think that's fun. It's funny. It's approachable. It, again, is completed. And there's a reason that was the series that really got publishers to care about Josei again. So, yeah. Also, I mean, some of the one-shots we've already talked about. All My Darling Daughters, Maiden Railways. Sakuran is impossible to find, but if you can find that, get it. Close Called Fat, all of them. Really.
Haru's Curse, as well as what was I just thinking of? Haru's Curse and I Am Paradise Kiss. Oh my god! Just got that, the new release where it's all collected in one volume. So.
That one super thick
one
volume.
Super big, thick boy. Yep, that's a doorstop right there, but it's a great value if you want to read a 5-volume series in one book. But, Paradise Kiss is really great. Really, really great. I don't know. It's about, a girl who gets sort of hired by a group of fashion students to be their model, and it kind of goes from there. But, it's messy. It's all about, this girl, like, growing up in the context of learning about the fashion world and learning her passion for modeling, or if she even has a passion for modeling, and her messy as hell relationship with this guy named George. And and it's really good.
Yes, it is. And I say that as someone who, like, when I first read it, when I first watched it, man, I really did not like it at all. But since reading the manga at 10 years older, and with it being the situation kind of a little more distanced from certain aspects of that situation that were similar to my own life, yeah, it's good. No, not the relationship stuff. Don't worry about that. I never had those issues. It was more so like the stress of school and all those sorts. So that just decisions were made in that or in that series for understandable reasons.
I was gonna say, Ayazawa does not write characters who make smart decisions.
Well, exactly. And that's why... So when I was a 17-year-old in my last year of school with the stress of university exams, and the main character was like, I'm just gonna quit school and drop out and run away, and I only have 3 months left, but this is what I want to do. The frustration of, like, girl, why? I know it's, like, hard, but you literally have not even 12 weeks. You can just...
But I can't take it anymore. I've got to, like, take my first steps into the world. And me and this guy are going to be together forever.
Girl, do you really want to be a high school dropout when you are literally, like, 3 months away? You've made it this far. Oh, my God.
Anyway, Paradise Kiss is really good, and when she walks out in the blue dress at the end, I cry every time.
No, it is good. It is good.
Next just one is from at Cursed Kona, cursed_Kona. Any recs for Josei manga about adult women who are lethargic, depressed, or lonely, especially if it has a tense or quiet atmospheric feeling to it. Also, can each of you share a few Josei mangaka with great art styles? That second one, let's save for the next set of questions, because there's one that's similar to it. But this recommendation one, we can do now.
Yep.
My lesbian experience with loneliness.
Oof, yeah. Yep. And the subsequent follow-up of my solo exchange diary. And
did you see that she's writing a new one?
Yes, and
I'm so stressed out.
Yes, oh God. Oh, Sensei, no. So,
I'm gonna keep reading it, though. I'm gonna keep reading it.
Yeah. My lesbian experience with loneliness, my solo exchange diary, and her new upcoming book in English, not the new one she's writing, but is my something with alcoholism, my alcoholic something. This poor woman
God
is not in a good place mentally, physically, sexually, emotionally. She's just all sorts of
she's
wrung
just
out.
Down bad.
It's really bad. And so her memoirs are her manga, and she depicts her struggles very intimately and very upfront, and it's incredibly hard to read, because I think really there's just so much going on in her life, and not a lot of happiness that she recognizes, and she's not getting the support, or doesn't realize the support she is getting. It's a tough one, but it's also really, in that way, it's very powerful. And when I'm with Ray in that, like, I desperately want her to stop writing, just in so far that I want her life to get better.
Yeah.
But for very in-your-face, confronting, emotionally raw memoir, you cannot go past My Lesbian Experience with Loneliness and its subsequent sequels. It is... Yeah, it's a rough one.
Yeah. No end to this woman's suffering. None.
Her new series is about her eating disorder, which is, so the first one was about a lot of things, but was framed around her struggle with her sexuality and her lack of relationships. And then the second one was about kind of her perspective, reflecting on the perspective that she had.
Well, it was like her book got popular, and then her parents read it, and they were
upset.
A little...
And concerned.
Concerned about the way they were portrayed in the first one.
Yes.
Oh my god, I'm so worried.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. I would say adult women who are lethargic, depressed, or lonely. I feel like there's quite a few.
Yeah.
Haru's
Helter Skelter is sort of
Helter Skelter, yeah. Enclosed called Fat as well.
Yes, very much.
Otherworld Barbara to some extent. There's quite a few, like, main characters in that. But I'm thinking of, like, Aoba.
Yeah. My Broken Mariko as well, as I mentioned earlier, like that exacerbated by grief, but certainly,
Erika Sakurazawa manga tend to have kind of a tense and quiet atmosphere to them.
Oh, well, especially things like Between the Sheets and, a lot of the stuff that we've gotten from her.
Yeah, so I hope there's something in there that you haven't read yet. Last set of questions is from @StoriedShelves. First question is, what are some of your favorite Josei series in terms of the art style? And we can combine this with the previous question of Josei mangaka with great art styles.
Can I say all of them? But also, more specifically, I'm gonna kind of mimic my earlier answer with Haruko Kumota.
Yeah.
I think she has a really fluffy, like, I don't know, kind of loopy art style. I like it a lot.
It's really cute. The little faces she draws on her characters.
Yeah.
And, like, Itoshi no Nekoke especially is all done in, like, watercolors, the way that, like, Takako Shimura stuff is. I love that style. So.
I also really like, again, Akiko Higashimura. I think she has a really appealing and just really nice art style. I think it's just really attractive. The Enclosed Cold Fat, like, Ano has a really, it's very starkly different from those other two, but incredibly to the point and very effective. And Okazaki as well.
I was going to say Moyoko Ano and Mari Okazaki are actually two of my favorite illustrators. You can see some of their more involved illustration work if you look at their Twitters, and they just absolutely gorgeous. Ayazawa came out with, like, a calendar last year, and it's, like, so beautiful. So I definitely love those artists a lot.
I also like, and although I've only read one series of them, and although it does appeal to my more obvious interests, I think Matsuri, who does Phantom Tales of the Night, like the atmosphere in that series is super good. The use of blacks, the paneling, it's just, I love it. But again, bias, so.
Yeah, well, I mean, Hagyo, so. Yeah, she's just so wild. I don't know. It's like, I wish more artists would be that thoroughly embracing of just bizarre visual metaphor.
Yeah.
There's, like, one of my favorite, like, spreads from her is from A Savage God Reigns, and, it's, you know, the main character, Jeremy, is, like, he has a lot of, like, breaks from reality where he can't remember if he killed his mother or not, and he is unclear if he wants to keep it a secret or, like, tell other people, or if he has told other people. It's a lot, but he's dealing with, like, all these feelings of, like, keeping things hidden within himself, and, like, he walks downstairs into the basement, and it's a really clear, like, Poe reference, where, like, his own corpse just, like, falls out of the wall next to him and rots.
Oh my god.
And it's so good. More artists should do stuff like that, because it's
where
wild.
Your corpse falls out of the wall, and then you see yourself.
You know that
rot.
feeling when your corpse falls out of the wall next to you and rots into a skeleton,
and you become intensely aware of your own mortality. Yeah, man, love
absolutely. She's great. Also, for series, I guess, because this creator does seinen and shoujo and whatever, Chika Umino's Honey and Clover.
Yes.
I love her art. I have her Honey and Clover art book, and her art is just so sweet.
It is, and I'm hunting that art book myself because I love her stuff.
So cute.
Super duper cute. And that is a wonderful series as well. If you can,
it is.
Well, if you can find all of it, I think volume 8 is super duper out of print, but the rest of it should be fine. And I think you can also buy it digitally again, so check it out. And has a good anime available from Discotheque, so
yes,
check that out.
It's super good. It's about a group of art students. Well, some of them are, like, graduated, but they're all, like, alumni of the same art college.
Some of them won't graduate. They just refuse to graduate.
Yeah. One of them's a professor. Yeah. You refuse. Oh my god. And then he, like, just randomly goes overseas for, like, a few months, and he comes back, and he's like, yeah, I worked on a film with George Lucas.
Like, look at all this money I have. And they're like, why do you eat all of the trash food then if you have all this money?
You are what you eat, and he is trash, and he's afraid of being anything else.
Man, Morita is just like,
what a
honestly, pure artist energy. Like, he is peak artist, let's be real.
He is like chaos gremlin energy. Yeah. That's wow. I mean, everyone's a mess in that series, to be honest. Yep. But I kind of like how that series has, like, it'll, like, take a very relatable feeling from that era of your life, like when you're in college or trying to figure out what you're going to do with your life. And, like, take it to such an extreme. Because it's like we all have that, like, crazy friend from college who it's like, they always seem to have all these crazy opportunities, but, like, you don't understand why, because they're insane. And it just, like, takes that to, like, the comedic extreme of, like, this guy is actually, like, loaded from, like, the fact that he is just such a genius that he gets picked up by, like, all of these famous movie directors who want to work with him. but he seems barely aware of that fact because he's just struggling to put his pants on in the morning.
He never sleeps in his own room. He doesn't ever have like $1 to pay for anything. He makes a skateboard out of someone else's shit, and you're just like, oh my, like, there's so many ways that you didn't have to do this. You could have avoided this, but then people are just like, yeah, it's just that guy. Like, it's just how he is. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, oh, him? Yeah, that's just Morita. It's fine. Don't worry.
No, don't worry. Don't worry. And the professors are like, please graduate this year. And he's like,
I think I'll stay for another year.
Yeah. His professor begs. He's like, tears in his eyes, like, please, just finish your graduation project.
I think I'm gonna work into metalworking.
You're so close. And then he finally does graduate. They're like, goodbye. And then he's like, yeah, I'm just starting as a new graduate. Like, I'm going into not sculpture. It's going into something else. And you're like, oh my god, kid.
No. Free us from your curse.
Please,
but, like,
leave.
I always, like, my favorite part of that series is, I guess sort of the main character, Yuta. It's an ensemble cast, but I guess if you had to pick a main character, it'd be him. He has this, like, quarter-life crisis, and he just drops everything. Like, it's the middle of the night, he just gets on his bike and just, like, goes. And it actually ends up encompassing a kind of large chunk of the series, where he just, like... Yeah. He just keeps
trying
going.
To find himself.
Yeah.
He's just trying to find himself. Trying to find who he is and what he wants to be.
He ends up biking all the way to Hokkaido. You know? Mm-hmm. It's not, like, technically realistic, but it's like, haven't you been there? You know? Like, yeah. I've been there.
Especially for him, because he's surrounded by so many talented, accomplished people who seem to know what they want to do, or they seem that like they have their plans, where he really doesn't know what he wants to do. He likes art and he likes doing what he's doing, but he's not famous. He doesn't have like people following his work. He doesn't have like this.
He doesn't like live and breathe it the way that like Morita or Hagu do.
Yeah.
And he's not as diligent as Ayu, you know, and he's not as pragmatic as Mayama.
And so it's him getting that perspective, and like outside of his bubble of friends who seem to have things worked out, which they don't have things worked out, just spoilers, but
no. Absolutely not.
but I think that's the thing, is that you always know, like, when it's yourself, you are aware of your struggles, but the people around you can very often seem to have everything, like all their ducks in a line. They've got things, people can put on very put together affections, right? Like people can look like they know what they're doing, they've got life sorted, when in actuality their life's a hot mess. But you don't see that struggle necessarily. You just know that you feel like you're falling behind, or you don't have that thing that makes you interesting or unique, or that thing that you're super passionate about and want to dedicate your whole life to. And so you feel like you're missing something. And I think that's something that is really well portrayed in that series. Love it.
Super good.
My other favorite artists, and again, big fangirl, repeating myself, but Fumi Yoshinaga. I love her art style. It's quite simple, but very expressive, and is able to capture a lot, even though her art isn't like hyper detailed. It isn't like, I don't know, I've seen a lot of different criticisms of her art, which is fair, but the way that her characters emote, you will be laughing at, like, the first panel of the page. And then 3 panels later, you will be crying because it's just such a natural, organic way that it's portrayed. And it's so human. It's so good.
And then some of our favorites because of the story. Favorite creators, I feel like we already covered. Favorites because of the story would be... So I guess stuff that we don't necessarily care about the art, but love because of the story. Probably all the series that we mentioned that we did not mention in the question about art styles.
Yeah. Chihayafuru, I think the art is lovely. I think it's really wonderful, but even if, like, I don't read that series because the art is captivating. Yeah. I read that because it's a really good series. It's got really wonderful characters. I do think that the art helps it in a lot of ways, but I don't think that the art is what makes that series good or stand out or anything. I would recommend that series for more than just the art style. Art style would be one of the least things I would even think about when recommending that series to someone.
Yeah, for me, there is sort of a generic, I guess, Josei style that doesn't... I wouldn't say it doesn't appeal to me. It's just like I look at it and I'm like, yep, that's a Josei series. That I think you see in stuff like Perfect World or like Everyone's Getting Married, where it's like, I really love those series, but it's not like I picked up the series because I looked at the cover and I was like, whoa!
Yeah.
You know? It's just... Actually, Perfect World in particular, I think she struggles sometimes. Maybe a little too ambitious for her artistic skills at times, but not like distractingly so. Yeah. Those are the 2 that are coming to mind where I'm like, they're really good, but also the art is like fine, I guess.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, there's a lot of series. I never like, and this might be weird when we're talking about a visual medium, and it's not to say that art doesn't matter, but it's not. There's only a few particular artists that I necessarily find art striking enough initially to just pick up a series off the shelf or like off of Amazon or something that really catches my eye. Most of the time it would have to be like the premise interests me, and if I'm already sold on the premise, then the art is kind of hopefully complimentary, but if it's a little bit janky, I'm like, that's fine, whatever.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty picky.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, no, I'm picky about art. If I think something's ugly, I just put it down. Which tells you that I don't think that Perfect World is ugly. I just think it's passable. And then the sort of last question, I guess, from At Storied Shelves is, what are some themes or topics that you enjoyed seeing covered in Josei, and how might that approach differ in other demographics? What do I like seeing? I like all the stuff we've been talking about just portraying the lives of older women in society, I guess.
Well, yeah, I think there's going back to the sort of our first question about romance and that difference between like adults being in a relationship versus teenagers being in a relationship, and so that's, I mean, I like romance. I don't read romance novels or anything. I don't have anything against them. It's not something I seek out, but I like a good love story, like the best of us, right? So, when I can wholeheartedly enjoy a romance, with adult characters, with more relatable characters, at my current time in life versus like when I was a teenager, then I like that. I like to see that, and I like to support that.
I guess my favorite things to see portrayed in Josei is like the weird gal manga post year 24, like, let's talk about, you know, exactly all of the ways that society has and continues to fuck women over. Like,
yeah.
In the most, like, harrowing way possible. So, I mean, I feel like I see those issues treated well within other demographics. I've definitely seen it treated well in shoujo, for sure. As well as, like, seinen, obviously. There's just so much variety in seinen manga, you just can't paint it with a brush. I probably would be less interested in reading a shonen manga about that stuff. I would be worried about where the editorial department might neuter that kind of series for that audience.
The other thing that I, just thinking about it, that, and this is going to sound weird, right? But the thing that I really appreciate for Josei is treating women like people, and like, in that they're able to make mistakes, but also that, like, just because you're a working woman or a mother or, you know, past 30 or whatever, you can still have, like, nerdy hobbies. You can still be, like, interested in something, or not interested in romance or finding a partner.
Or you can go out, like, on a Wednesday night to the bar with your girlfriends to talk shit.
Exactly. And so allowing women,
walk around your apartment with no pants on.
No bra on, no pants on, beer
I feel
cracked,
like,
hell yeah.
I feel like allowing women to be
people
to be everything that is human, not just flawed, but, like, undignified and ugly and ungraceful and not necessarily always existing to be seen by others, you know?
Yeah. And that's my thing, is that in a lot of, especially, and this is for obvious reason, because they're not, very rarely, the main characters, but in, like, and in certain seinens as well, but in shoujo and shonen, women who are working women and mothers are there as a support system for the child character, typically. Yeah. And so they are portrayed in a certain way, whether it be homemaker, whether it be whatever. You know, the wise mother who's always like, yes, my darling, and then, like, pats you on the head. And
good wife, wise mother.
Yeah. And when you're a child, that's, I think, how you see your parents. Like, you don't see your parents necessarily as who they are, right? Because you are a child, and they're adults, and they have things that they don't show they don't necessarily like to show their struggles to their children. They want to be that support system, or they want to be that authoritarian, influence in their life, or whatever. So, when you have women being portrayed outside of mother, teacher, nurse, the romantic object of affection, which a lot of seinen has, and have them be their own person, that's what I like to see and read, because obviously adult women are people, and we do have things that are...
And I feel like even in some of, like, my favorite, like, say, seinen titles that are, perhaps by a male creator or for a presumed male audience, even if, like, they're my favorites and they have some of my favorite female characters in them, there's still, like, a distance, I feel like. There's still something there that's like, this female character is just not fully realized to the extent that the male characters are. Where it's like, this character is really good and has a complex inner life and has goals and motivations and fears and flaws. But there's just a lived-inness that isn't quite there that there is with the male characters. And I feel like Josei is where I go to get that. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's more eloquent than my my explanation, but yeah, exactly.
Because it's like, it's women writing for other women to read about women. And, there's just gonna be a perspective there that no one else is quite going to get. Which is why Josei manga, has a unique value, and everyone should give it a shot.
Yep. Get to it.
Lots of titles in this episode for you to choose from.
And that's not even, like, all of them. That we didn't even really talk about any of the Harlequin romance stuff, because they're not really stuff that we, in particular, read. But there's a lot of it. There is a whole bunch of it available.
There's a lot of it. Yeah, I mean, I like Butterfly's Flowers, which is trashy. So, we've all got our poison.
And you, dear listeners, know our poisons far too well, because we talk about them all of the time.
Yeah. But yeah. That's Josei manga, and that's the last question.
Yes. It was, I think, hopefully enlightening, interesting, if nothing else. If you were someone who asked for recommendation in particular, I hope that everything we talked about has given you sort of an idea, or some titles that you can chase up on, maybe piqued your interests, because that's what we always hope to do for you.
Next
My
month
birthday.
is G's birthday, and
Yay!
y'all know what that
Another
means.
Another year, another circle around the sun, and because it's my birthday, I get to demand whatever topic I want, and thus I am going to inflict onto all of you, as I did constantly this episode, so we know just how bad next episode's gonna be.
The long-awaited
for Miss Fumi Yoshinaga and all of her amazing series, of which we have 95-ish% of everything she's put out available legally in English. So there'll be a lot to talk about. And if you've not tried her work, I would encourage you to do so. There's a lot of her stuff in a lot of different demographics, a lot of different genres, and I'm sure we'll be talking about majority of them, if not all of them, but probably not all of them. There's some BL that doesn't need a deep dive into, but her main series, of which are multiple and wonderful, I'll definitely be talking about. And Ray, thank you in advance for putting up with me. And
you have been putting up with my constant Takarazuka DMs.
This is true. So next month is March. We're going to be talking about Fumi Yoshinaga and all of her amazing series. And so if, as always, you have questions, I'll be putting out a tweet. A reminder as well that if you are wanting to be a guest on the podcast at any particular time, or you just would like to join us for an episode, I have also put together a guest form, which you can find on my Twitter, which is @collectinggee, that being GEE. All one word on Twitter. It's linked in the description below. You can fill out that form and give us some information, and we hope to invite you on. And otherwise, make sure to let us know your questions beforehand, whether that be in the comments on this video if you're watching this on YouTube, or again when I ask for questions on my Twitter. And Ray always retweets, so you can, if you're just following her as well, then I'm sure you'll see.
Then what are you doing? Follow G.
And just a reminder that as well as being available on YouTube, you can listen to the podcast on basically every major podcasting platform, including Google Podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, including Spotify. We're on everything. So, and the episode comes out at the same time, or as close to the same time as I can usually get it. So, yes. Hope you guys look forward to next month. And thank you guys so much for listening. I will catch you in the next episode. Bye till then.
Bye, guys.